For my whole life, it seems like I've been too much of something. I talk too much, I'm too sensitive, too aggressive, too timid, too soft. I let those words shape my identity and question my passion, always feeling like I needed to apologize for the space I took up with both my voice and my body. But now I realize it wasn't that I was too much, it's that the rooms were just too small. I'm Kaylee, a recovering self-critic, figure skating enthusiast, health and wellness advocate, and the official defender of your passion. Welcome to Reasonably Loud, the space where we stop apologizing for our muchness and start using it as our superpower. Let's dive in. Quick note before we begin. While I am a certified personal trainer and a certified intuitive eating counselor, I am not a doctor or a licensed medical professional. The information in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider before making changes to your diet or exercise routine. Now, let's get into the show. Hello. Wow, I can't believe that we're finally here. I have been thinking about doing a podcast for a few years, and to actually be here recording episode 0 is really, really exciting. Maybe you can relate to this. I often come up with a lot of ideas for things I want to do or try, and maybe some of them get past the thinking stage, some might even get into casual conversation, some ideas may even get as far as the doing stage, but then most fizzle out. And I imagine that's pretty normal of a process for most folks. I did a quick web search and found that there's research about the space between thinking and doing called the intention behavior gap. And side note, like most things neurological, I found the bit of reading I did to be extremely interesting and I want to take a deeper dive. So, I'm making a note of a possible future episode about this. But one of the things that stood out to me that will really nicely segue us into the purpose of this podcast was that the space between thinking of doing something, say starting a podcast, and actually doing it actually has benefits and it's not a failure. And yet, most of the time, I see my inaction on my ideas and goals as failure or laziness, when actually it's a lot more nuanced than that. Most things in life are not pass fail. We may see it like that because it's true that if you don't win the big prize, then technically you lose. But that's only looking at it from one narrow and specific outcome. Really, overall, in all facets of life, everything we do, the actions and the spaces, is all about gathering information, experience, and connection to make things deeper and more personal and more visceral. Which brings us to why we're here to begin with. I started out wanting to do a podcast because I felt like I had some things to say about diet, fitness, and the wellness industries. And at its core, this podcast is about health, wellness, fitness, and nutrition from the lens of somebody who has been on both sides of the industry as a customer and as a student, and now as a personal trainer for over 10 years, and an intuitive eating counselor officially for the last couple of years. And I love it. I find the human body to be wildly fascinating and frustrating and exhausting and beautiful. I love to explore all the facets that influence our health, wellness, fitness, nutrition, the way we think, the way we rest. And I think it's important because so much of the fitness industry bottlenecks an extremely complex system into two very narrow categories: food and exercise, as if those two things alone solely control how our bodies look, respond, and feel. And not just our bodies, but also our minds, too. Not to mention the morality piece that kind of hovers over everything. It's like this umbrella that looms over it all, is that morality piece of being good, being bad. I'm good, I'm bad, it's good, it's bad. Um, But yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself. The point is that I love this topic and I am so passionate about it. And I always say to people that if I could talk endlessly about it, I probably could, but because it's a never ending exploration. So here's the thing about me and talking endlessly. And this is the kind of the second part of this podcast. You have the health and wellness part of it, but then here's the second part of it. Here's the real gem, I believe, of this podcast and what I envision it to be. There's always been this little asterisk in my head whenever I start babbling on about something, especially something that I'm super passionate about. And when I look back, it kind of came back to when I was about 13 or 14. I was at a Bible study with a youth group at my church at the time, and I can't remember the exact topic that we were discussing, but I must have been fervently adding quite a bit to the conversation. And I don't even remember what I was saying. But what I do remember is the girl next to me turning to me and saying, "You talk a lot." Now, whether she meant it to shut me up, which is probably how I took it, as a bad, again, that morality piece, right? Um, or maybe she just meant it as a playful observation. At that moment, regardless of what her intention was, at that moment, the asterisk, the wing clip, if you will, the self consciousness of myself set in. And I have been keenly aware ever since that I am a talker. Unfortunately, like so many of us, labels stick for better or for worse. And I was talking to a client the other day about it actually, and she said that she was the victim of the dumb blonde label throughout high school. So labels are there. I know that this is not a unique situation. I know that I am not, the only one who's gone through this. But I'm solely talking about my own experience and the asterisks that attached to myself from that moment. And I also know that weight and body size can have an impact on the names, labels, and identities that people face throughout their life as well. For me, the label of talking too much planted a seed of insecurity. Talking too much mutated into being too much in some ways, or even not being enough in other ways. The worst part of all of that mutation of those labels is how it ultimately affects our personal worth and value. Being labeled as a talker with a big, loud personality, either intentionally or unintentionally, internalized in me that that was bad. I was bad. That's unacceptable, and people won't like me. And I kind of moved through life with that lingering thought. And maybe the real impact was that I let the voices saying I was too much take up that space in my head and influence how I moved through my social spheres. So often through my teens, 20s, and even still now into my late 30s, I desperately wished I could just be a quiet observer in the background, not the personality that no matter how hard I tried, ended up being a boisterous presence. Every time I would feel myself take up more space, the insecurities and overthinking would start. I didn't know it then, but I was in a constant state of self objectification, watching myself through other people's eyes instead of just living my life. I could probably count on one hand how many times I felt like this personality that I had was socially acceptable. I really only remember apologies and embarrassment. Instead of learning how to receive what was helpful, for example, knowing that there's a time to speak up and a time to let others have their moment, I let those labels strip my confidence, keep me small, and breed anxieties. As an adult, I have started working through some of those past encounters and with both compassion for others and for myself. Like I said earlier, most things are not simply two-sided. And as much as there are people who will deliberately want to cause you harm, I don't think that that's always the case. The too much label definitely stuck and definitely influenced how I saw myself and how I related to others, but I don't think it was put there maliciously. And I don't think any person or people are to blame, including myself. I know for a fact that I have also been the unknowing agent in the labels of other people as well. And as embarrassing as it is, unfortunately, there were some that were purposeful, albeit most likely out of protection for myself. Nothing is more annoying for someone who's been told to be quiet and not talk as much than a person who is loud and free spirited. What do you mean they can be themselves, but I have to shrink my voice? I know I've tried to quiet people in the same way that I've been quieted, but I realize now that I wasn't judging them because they were wrong. I was judging them because I was starving for the freedom that they had. And that's why we're here. What better place to blab and share my gift of gab than on a podcast where I get to talk all I want and you have to listen? I'm just kidding, honestly. I welcome positive and constructive feedback, please. I'm a very sensitive soul. In a lot of ways, going through the process of thinking, planning, pondering, asking, hesitating, researching, quitting, restarting, and finally committing to this venture has been a real healing process. Not only for the little girl whose wounds have marred her big, passionate personality, but for the wounds I have also inflicted on others. I am learning that the way to heal is not through bringing others down, but by lifting everyone up because we all have a voice, perspective, and experience that is worthy of time and respect. I'm sorry to those I have hurt with my words and my actions, and I forgive those who did so to me, either consciously or unconsciously. I think there's value in feedback and opportunity to grow, but what I'm talking about is deeper. It's about the value and worth a person feels about themselves. Yes, there were times when I needed to be quieter, softer, dimmer, but that was for me to learn the proper place to be bold or to scale back, and that had nothing to do with my value as a person. So, what you can expect from this podcast is unapologetic passion. Love, frustration, anger, excitement, wonder, surprise, care, fear, concern, a full on, no holds barred embracing of the human experience. But what you can also expect is reasonable understanding, a passion for not only the expression, but the exploration of what it means to be human in a diet centric world. In the movie Legally Blonde, Elle's professor on her first day of class quotes Aristotle: "The law is reason free from passion." Now, your human experience in the world of fitness and nutrition is not by any means equal to the world of law and order. But we often treat it like it is, in a rules-bound, law-abiding way. And again, side note, I feel another podcast episode brewing with that kind of thought. Your life is not reason free from passion, like Elle Woods discovered. That's only part of the story. But passion without reason is also only part of the story. We need both and the wisdom and maturity to understand when, where, and how to fully own and empower our voices, however loud or quiet we want them to be. I also need to acknowledge that I know that there's privilege that comes from me being a white middle class woman from Canada. I know that there are people fighting battles for basic survival that I will never understand. But that's why we have empathy, to bridge the gaps between our stories and help us connect. When we lack empathy, we end up saying things like, "We all have the same 24 hours in a day," or "You should only buy organic whole foods." That line of thinking is not inclusive of the human experience and only serves to disconnect. That is not the kind of thing you will hear from me. As I was leading up to the recording of this episode, I was struggling with, again, whether or not I should do this, if I should let my voice be heard unapologetically. But now I know that staying small doesn't help anyone. I just end up being one more person hiding their light. So I'm choosing to be reasonably loud because I want to be a part of a world where everyone, regardless of their circumstances, feels worthy of taking up space. This is your place, your safe circle to bring your own superpower out of the shadows as we navigate our authentic health. Thank you so much for joining me today for Volume 0 of Reasonably Loud. If you felt a connection to today's stories, I'd love to hear from you on Instagram. My handle is at Coach Kaylee B. That's Coach CoachKayleeB. Or I'm on Facebook and look me up under KB Fitness and Wellness. Let's keep building the circle together. Until next time, take up your space, trust your voice, and stay passionate. I'm Kaylee, and I will talk to you soon.